Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 150 of Brew Talk with Mr. Beer. My name is Robert Lewis. I'll be your host for today's show. As always, we appreciate you guys taking the time to watch our weekly videos, or somewhat weekly videos now. After 150 videos, sourcing new topics gets a little difficult. So today I have 150 tips. It'll take me about 3 hours to run. No, I'm just kidding. Do not have 150 brew tips today. That would take a long time. I don't think nobody wants to watch a brewing video that would last 4 hours long about me talking about 150 brew tips. So today's topic is how to increase the ABV in your home brew. Thought this would be a useful topic now. You know, everyone is looking to get more bang for their buck, especially nowadays with how expensive things are. So kicking up the ABV in your home brew is a great way to maybe drink a little less beer, but get a little more of the buzz effect on. So we got some great items and tips that you can use to increase the ABV in your home brew. Both things you can purchase, from Mr.Beer when you're brewing up your recipe or your refill, or things you can use that are just sitting in your household to crank it up a notch. There are a few things that we wanted to point out before we get started, diving into what can increase your ABV. We always recommend brewing our refills and our recipes as is, especially if you are a new brewer. I mean, if you're just diving into home brewing in general, or you're taking your first stab at, brewing up some recipes, there's some additional steps in there, some additional layers in the process. So it's good for you to get a solid brewing foundation down. So everything is, your sanitizing is good, your temps are good, your water's good, everything is working solid before you really start experimenting. Because if you get excited about experimenting and trying to add new ingredients, that can lead to the potential of making an error, and then you get a terrible beer, and nobody wants that. And it is also important to note that you should always chase flavor, not ABV. Adding different adjuncts and fermentables is going to change the flavor of your beer, how it tastes, smells, all that stuff like that. So, if you decide to dump a whole, pound of sugar into your beer, which you can, it's not going to taste very well. I mean, you're going to kick up that ABV quite a lot, but that taste is going to be pretty rough. So, always make sure you're adding, decent quantities of what we recommend here, and chasing the flavor, matching something that pairs well with what you're brewing, not just trying to make the most monstrosiest beer that you can. So let's dive into what you can add. The first one's obvious, tends to be what we recommend: adding more malt extract to your beer. Adding malt extract, either hopped malt extract, liquid malt extract, or dried malt extract, will increase the ABV of your beer and will also improve the flavor as well. So that's the best way to get both of the increase in ABV and flavor. We offer like deluxe refills on the website that come with 2 packs of LME to boost up the ABV. And we also offer on our ingredients tab, we have liquid malt extract, dry malt in the HME cans as standalone items. So if you're like, oh, I want to brew, this refill, but I want to double it in a 2-gallon batch, you can just buy a second can to add to it. You're like, oh, I want to add, 4 boosters to this beer, or I want to add some DME to this brew. You can buy all the individual ingredients on there and kind of create your own unique recipe and kick up the ABV and create some good flavors and stuff like that. So the next few items we're going to go through are ones that can be found around your house. So if you already got stuff to brew with, or you don't feel like spending the extra money with Mr. Beer, you're like, I already got sugar lying around, I got honey lying around, can I use that? Absolutely can. We recommend adding 1 cup or 2 cups max of these to your beer. Depending on what you're using, it'll add about 1 to 1.5% ABV per cup to the final beer. So if you add 2 cups of brown sugar, that's going to increase your ABV by beer up to like 2%. So if you're brewing a 5%, it's going to drop that or crank that bad boy up to a 7. First, we will start with sugars. You can add table sugar, corn sugar, or brown sugar. You just want to be careful with the amount of sugar you're adding. As we mentioned earlier, it can create some odd flavors. So stick into that 1 to 2 cup max range. When adding these things like sugar, you should add them to your 4 cups of water that you're bringing to a boil, and mix it until they're thoroughly dissolved, and then follow the brewing process as is for whatever recipe or refill you happen to be brewing at that time. It is also a good idea to pair the type of sugar you're going to be using to the type of beer you're going to be brewing. So like brown sugar, for example, will be good with stouts, porters, ambers, kind of darker style beers. Whereas something like corn sugar would work well for like a light lager or an ale, or maybe even an IPA or a pale ale, something that's a little lighter in body, lighter in flavor. Adding that like dark brown sugar is going to bring out a little more richness in your beer, a little more of that molasses type flavor, whereas the other sugars will not do that. So keep that in mind when you're kind of creating your own masterpiece there. One thing to note about sugar is you cannot use sugar substitutes. They will not ferment. So things like stevia or Splenda won't work. Don't use them. Stick to the old school stuff. And then a few other liquids and syrups you can use. You can add things like honey, maple syrup, agave nectar, corn syrup. Again, these will add about 1% to 1.5% ABV per cup to your beer. Again, when you add these, you'll add them to your 4 cups of water that you're bringing to a boil and mix them up until they are dissolved. And like, again, it's a good thing to pair these with whatever type of beer you're going to be brewing. Although some of these are a little more, widespread, I'd say. Like honey can be used to make, we got a honey stout, or you can use it in like a honey lager, stuff like that. So you can get creative with some of that stuff. I mean, I personally like using brown sugar. I think works great in dark beers, and I really like using honey in lighter beers. I think they make a really cool flavor and it tastes really good. So if you're looking to experiment with any one of those two, I'd recommend brown sugar and I'd recommend honey. And maple syrup works great in stouts and porters and stuff like that as well. So that is going to wrap it up for this week's video, our 150th video. Hopefully you picked up some tips here on how to crank up your next beer to get a little more buzz on if you so choose to. If you have any questions about things you want to add to your beer, how much, etc., contact our customer service team, Zach and Nash. We'll be glad to help you guys out. You can go to the website and chat with them, or you can shoot an email to customerservice@mrbeer.com. We can answer any questions you got there. And make sure you're following us on all social media platforms. We are at Mr. Beer on Facebook, the Instagram, and the YouTube. And if you want to learn more about Mr. Beer, hang out with fellow Mr. Beer brewers, join our Facebook group, Mr. Beer's Brewing Society. You can find that just by searching Mr. Beer's Brewing Society on Facebook. That is going to wrap it up for this week's video, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Cheers.